All right, guys. Welcome to Romine Radio. It's been about a week since we had anything going on here, but we're getting back rocking and rolling here. And I got a friend of mine. He's, in a small town, stars shine bright. And this dude, I'm always been interested in what he's got going on. And I got him in the studio here. Aaron Beck. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you today, Jesse?
I'm doing good, man. So one of the things about Aaron is that you do like prosthetics and like Halloween masks. That's your forte.
Yeah. I'm trained in special effects makeup, and more or less, I consider myself more of a production sculptor than anything. I find myself on film sets from time to time, and that's always fun.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that you had some like a writing credit, and you've been doing a little bit of writing or.
Yeah. The past couple of years, I've been working really closely with a guy named Rich Robinson from Winston-Salem. He's a great up and coming filmmaker. He's been working in the industry for several years. He's got a film out. I can't remember what year it came out. It's called Marcus. It's available through a few limited outlets. It's out of print these days, but such is the way of independent film sometimes. But Rich is a great guy, and we've been collaborating on writing on several projects over the years. And right now, the last production that we've had come out is a short film called The Graveyard Feeder, which I have a writing credit on with Rich. We produced it as a short film, but we initially wrote it as a feature. And we've been shaking money trees for a couple of years trying to find the funding to do it the right way. Yeah. So there's a few irons in the fire. They're kind of getting lukewarm, so we'll see what happens with that.
Me and you met up a couple months back. Well, maybe 6 months. I don't know, but I mean, we were talking about. I've been trying to do a movie myself.
Right.
I mean, that's like rolling a ball uphill, bro.
Yeah. It's one of the most difficult things I've ever encountered. I mean, there's been so many instances where we've felt like we were talking to the right people, and it just. Things start to come together. You feel like you're gaining a little bit of traction on this uphill battle. Yeah. And, it seems like right when you're at the precipice, everything just falls apart. It's just par for course in this industry, which is very frustrating, but sometimes it really helps thicken your skin and give you, a sense of perseverance. Yeah. Like, we've got to see this through. We've gone so far.
Yeah. I mean, and then once you get it made, is it going to go anywhere?
Yeah.
I'm actually connected with Rich, the guy you work with.
Oh, great.
And he was telling me, he was like, look, man, unless you really got something that's going to move and audiences are going to, perk their ears up about it, I mean, you got to be careful on what you commit to.
Yeah.
Because you can go through this whole ordeal of like getting it done, and then is it worth it?
Yeah, exactly.
So I was like, oh, man.
And, it's odd enough through our contacts, we've discovered that, on the back end, it's much easier. Once you have a finished product, it's much easier to sell it. We've collaborated on several promotional pieces. We've got a few trailers out for a couple of properties that we've been trying to develop over the past couple of years. And every distributor that we've talked to who's looked at those have said, if you had a finished product, we would buy it and put it on the market right now. Wow. But unfortunately, we can't find the investors who want to put forward that first money, because investing in the film industry is very much a gamble. There's so much product that's getting made and not a lot that's getting money on the back end to reimburse the investors.
Well, I mean, so let's go back a little bit. How did you get into for your I guess your forte is, doing like prosthetics and stuff like that. Do you got like a setup at your house or?
For a while, I was when I was living at my folks' place, they have a very large basement, and I had a little bit of a shop set up there. Okay. I did some a lot of fabrication there in my parents' basement. Yeah. And since the last project I worked on with Rich, I haven't really had any projects to work on, so it's just gotten cluttered, and I don't really have adequate workspace at the moment.
Well, where did you get started doing? Where did you get the idea from to do these kind of prosthetics and stuff like that?
Well, I've been a sculptor all my life. I always was drawn to clay as a child in art class. I had Play-Doh play sets, and it just fascinated me. And I grew up geek. I was big into collecting action figures. Yeah. And I decided early on, I was like, I want to do this for a living. I would love to create toys of these awesome comic book characters and characters from movies for other geek collectors like myself. And I started honing my sculpting skills early on. And by the time I graduated high school, I was pretty good at what I was doing and tried to find an outlet to find a career in it. Mm-hmm. And through all the education outlets, I could not find the right thing. And one day my friend Brian Hall came to me and he says, look, I just bought the Friday the 13th box set, and in the special features, there's a featurette on Tom Savini's makeup school. Tom Savini is legend in the splatter horror genre. He worked a lot with George Romero on all the classic zombie films, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and of course he worked on the original Friday the 13th and Part 4. Okay. So there's a big feature on him as a special effects artist on the box set for Friday the 13th. Nice. And they got into his school, which is located just outside Pittsburgh, and I was watching the feature. I was seeing what the kids were doing in the classroom, and I was just like, "Oh wow! I think this might be my calling," because I was seeing these kids doing the exact same thing that I had been doing in my spare time, sculpting, 12-inch tall maquettes of, just fantastical creatures, things that existed in movies already, things that they'd imagined, and then applying them on a much larger scale to actually apply them to people rather than just having a static sculpture or an action figure. And I was like, yeah, this is what I need to be doing. So I took a trip up to Pennsylvania, visited the school, met with all the head instructors, and they were like, yeah, this is where you need to go. So I spent a couple of years up there.
This is the Tom Savini school?
Yeah, I went to school in Tom Savini's program. I worked with Tom. I worked with...
That's awesome.
Yeah, Tom's a really cool guy.
He's a legend.
Yeah, he's so down to earth, and you can talk to him about just about anything. He's actually been to this area a lot. He likes Western North Carolina. He couldn't stop talking about the Biltmore House. He loved that place. He talked about almost getting kicked out for taking pictures all the way through.
Well, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, Tom's a fun guy. Also worked with a couple of really cool guys in the school as well. Worked with a guy named Jerry Gergley, who worked on, he actually won a couple of Emmys for Babylon 5 and The X-Files. Did some really impressive work on those shows. And a guy named Will Ritter, who used to work for Rick Baker's studios, and he worked on Kill Bill, and he was one of the creature fabricators for Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Did all the eyes and the teeth.
Nice.
And it was really great to work with those guys and learn, everything that they had to offer. It was awesome. Fantastic experience.
Yeah. So growing up, you were part of that '90s crew where the Todd McFarlane action figures and stuff kind of got big. Did you ever get into action figures at all? Or?
Oh yeah, I was huge into action figures, and McFarlane was actually a big inspiration to me when I started seeing the level of detail in the sculptures. They really upped the bar in the quality of the product that was being available. And
I remember some of the ones they did. They had like a Spawn, or they even did like a Austin Powers figurines that we got into, like the Fat Bastard character.
Oh yeah, those were great. I had all of those. I remember at one point when I was living in my folks' place, they could not stand it because my entire wall of my room was lined with action figures. I mean, they were just shingled. I had hundreds of those guys.
That is awesome, dude.
And funny story about McFarlane, actually. When I went to school in Pennsylvania, that was one of the highest fields of job placement for graduates of my program. Was to, a lot of them went to work for Todd McFarlane, McFarlane Studios, and that was at that point my dream job. So that was my first push for employment when I got out of school. I tried to get in with the toy companies, and McFarlane Toys actually responded to me, and I did some work for them, some test pieces, and I was on the verge of getting hired, and they decided they wanted to go to all digital to get more accurate likenesses on their licensed characters, like from movies and sports. Those were becoming their more prevalent lines, and they went to doing 3D scans and having their mold department clean up the 3D scans before going into production. So they ended up losing most of their sculpting department rather than hiring anybody, and I was kind of right there on the verge of when that was happening. So unfortunately, that job sort of didn't exist anymore after that.
The ship went from sail to steam, man.
Yep.
That's crazy, dude.
Yeah, it was kind of soul crushing for a little while, but you pick up the pieces and you move on and you find something else.
Where was that at? That you guys went to do test pieces and stuff?
They actually mailed them to me.
Really?
Their sculpting department and their production facilities are in Arizona.
Okay.
I think Tempe is the city that they're in Arizona, so I would have had to move out there.
Now, how long were you at school for at the Tom Savini School?
It was about a 2-year program.
Okay.
So
that's awesome, man. Well, now, so you guys out there, you guys have all heard about Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, all these things. I recently got to see Day of the Dead.
Oh, nice.
And it's it's just one of those movies that kind of slipped through my fingers that I never watched because I was into more like comedy and stuff like that growing up. But I mean, if you go back and watch that movie, it's sick, man.
Yes, it is grotesque.
Day of the Dead.
Yes.
I mean, it's. I did a little research on it, and they say that one's kind of like the sickest one.
Yeah, it really is. They had a lot of really genius people working in the special effects department on that one. I've seen some of Tom's personal behind the scenes footage from the production, and it's fantastic, the kind of stuff that they're doing, the kind of hell they had to put the actors through to pull off some of those shots, though. I couldn't imagine being on that set. It would have been a nightmare, but at the same time, it would have been beautiful.
Well, I heard, I mean, they shot it in this like cave or whatever it was, underground facility.
Yeah.
And everybody, like, months and weeks after they shot, were just like blowing out black stuff out of their nose, and it was just like, at one point, it looked. I guess they used real intestines.
Yeah, that was one of the worst horror stories that Tom had to tell out of the entire experience. They used these. They had like 3 or 4 big 5-gallon buckets of pig intestines that they'd bought from a meat processing plant that they were using just to bring another level of realism to the grotesqueness of what was going on, and at one point during the production, they took a break. They were filming in the winter, and they took a break for the holiday season. And when they came back, no one realized it, but the intestines had been stored in this giant cooler, and somebody had shut off the power to the facility over the break. So when they came back, they had like 3 or 4 5-gallon buckets full of rancid pig intestines.
Oh my God.
And the production was over budget at that point, so they couldn't buy anymore, and they just had to keep using what they had.
Oh my God.
And the very memorable scene towards the end where the guy who's just the jerk anti-hero, where he gets his legs torn off.
That guy's hilarious.
And his intestines just get pulled out. Those were rotten. And that's part why I saw that shot in Tom's behind the scenes footage. And while they're setting up the shot, everybody is wearing a respirator. Everybody. And then they just pull off their masks and the cameras are rolling, and the poor guy laying there about to have his guts ripped out is just gagging and just choking it back for the shot. And if you watch that scene really closely, you'll see that the zombies putting the guts in their mouth get it actually nowhere near their face. They're just pulling it out, moving their arms as if they're moving it towards their face to give you the illusion, and then the camera cuts because they don't want to get that stuff close to their face because they're all about to puke. And as soon as they yell cut, several people did puke. It was pretty disgusting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what impressed me was like the level of commitment that was involved with that film, and you see a lot with like I don't know, the trauma movies.
Yeah.
They got there's not a big budget, and there's a lot of commitment on the artistic end. And usually when you see that, you see a lot of like passion in the movie.
Yeah.
And then you see when these guys start getting bigger and bigger, their budgets get bigger,
Right.
and you start to lose some of that like authenticity. I think
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. A good example of that is George Romero, with his zombie movies, the classic trilogy that he did, the Night of the Living Dead, the Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. They all have this cohesive feel. And then 20 years later, they decide to do another big budget sequel, Land of the Dead. And if you watch it, it has a completely different feel than the original three. It just has that studio gloss to it, and it just makes the whole thing almost a mockery, but not quite. I mean, it's still a good movie. I still enjoy it, but just as part of the George Romero canon, I can't really, can't really fit it in. His next movie that he came out with, I can't remember the name of that one, but it was a lot better because it was more low budget. It was more back to the roots of
really?
What made those movies great.
All right. Well, that's cool. I mean, I think that with these like zombie flicks and stuff like that, what I love about Tom Savini and what they were doing was how creative they became. And through that creativity, they became like innovators, and they were setting like standards and stuff.
Yeah.
They set the bar.
Yeah, and it's really crazy. You talk about the innovation, the things that they had to pull off on set. I mean, they do things with toilet paper and corn syrup, and Elmer's glue and coffee grounds. Just the things that you'd go into your local grocery store or Walmart and just pick up off the shelf. Say, what can I use this for? Mm-hmm. And it's just really amazing.
Were you thinking of Survival of the Dead on George Romero's newest one?
That might be the next
Diary?
one. Diary of the Dead.
Diary?
That was the one. It was a sort of a first-person perspective. It was all shot handheld.
Okay, kind of like Blair Witch or Cloverfield or something.
Almost. It's like a traveling group of video bloggers.
Okay.
Documenting
that's an interesting concept.
Documenting the zombie outbreak. That's
kind of a big thing these days. Trying to latch onto that style of our life through the digital world.
Yeah.
It is what it is for me. What did you think about Blair Witch when it first came out? Did you get freaked out or what? I did.
I personally didn't. I was a little bit older when it first came out, and I had some high expectations going into it because of the marketing campaign and everything. And through the movie, I really enjoyed watching the movie, but at the end, I just felt kind of let down. And it was just like, okay, I was really invested, and I didn't get much of a return here.
Yeah. Well, going back to, lower budgets, being more creative, and then when they get a bigger budget, they lose some of that flair. I think one of the, rising, directors of our age, you've watched a little bit of Rob Zombie's films?
Yeah, I've watched some of his films. They have a really nice visual style. It's nice to see that Rob's an auteur, that he can branch out, and that his movies have been successful for him. Only one I can say I wasn't pleased with was the Halloween remake, and that's just a personal thing for me because I was a really big fan of the original. I'm a huge John Carpenter fan.
Yeah,
and just something about the character of Michael Myers in the original. One of the things that made Michael Myers so scary was the line from Donald Pleasance's character when he says, I looked into that child's eyes and they were black eyes. Those were the devil's eyes. And, even the scene where his mask gets ripped off, you never really get a good look at his face. And he's just, even in the credits, you see the character isn't credited as Michael Myers. It's credited as the Shape. John Carpenter never intended that character have any sort of humanity placed on him. And a lot of the people that I've talked to who really like that movie, they really like that aspect of it, that, it humanized Michael Myers to a degree. It gave him a personality. It gave him more of a character and made him more relatable and more human. And to me, that's almost like somebody saying, okay, I'm going to make a Dracula movie, but he's not going to be a vampire. We're just going to take that darkness, that monstrosity away from him. And I can appreciate what Rob Zombie was trying to do with it, but it just didn't make sense for me to have that sort of aspect played out for the character. But his other films, I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed The House of a Thousand Corpses. And I really enjoyed The Devil's Rejects. That's probably my favorite of his films. That one was a blast.
I love the level of detail. It's almost like the new one that came out about the Gaikus or whatever it's called, the robots fighting the.
Oh yeah, the Pacific Rim.
Pacific Rim. What was the director's name on that?
Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, like the level of detail these directors have is awesome.
Yeah. I love the director, that Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
I haven't watched Pacific Rim yet, and I'm sort of kicking myself for that one. But he directed one of my favorite films, Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's really cool.
Fantastic movie. Just every visual aspect of it is just captivating and beautiful, and just the story. It's an adult fairy tale, and it'll make a grown man cry. It's fantastic.
I mean, he sort of bounced off. Well, I don't know if they're related or not, but like Tim Burton, Tim Burton's got a style,
right?
And then he sort of became known for that. But then these other directors came up with their own style, and you know, it's sort of like that, but more not as mainstream. And,
I'll agree.
Check out Pacific Rim though; it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it, and I've looked through the creature design books. One of my good friends has the hardcover book that just came out. It's amazing, the level of detail in those characters and those creatures in that movie. It would have been a lot of fun to work on in the design room.
Right. Well, back when I was in film school, Aaron, you worked on a film for one of the students. He was doing a senior project, and it was the Bela Lugosi style kind of Dracula, I guess is kind of what it reminded me of. I don't know, but he was doing a horror film, and you guys worked with him.
Yeah. I remember it was Aaron Putnam.
Yeah.
The film he did was called Strigoi, and it was a fun little vampire film. It was sort of a cat and mouse game, sort of Appalachian themed. It was a lot of fun to work on. I did the character makeup for the vampire creature, and I did a severed head prop for one of the characters that was decapitated in the film. It was a lot of fun to work on. Aaron was a good director.
Right on. I mean, so and that's one of the things. Like, not only are you doing like props and stuff like that, but you actually do like work with the actors themselves. How long does that process usually take? I mean,
it's a pretty labor-intensive process, depending on what you're doing with an actor. A lot of things, makeup-wise, you can do on an actor in the chair. If you're doing it out of the kit, you can do something fairly elaborate and within 45 minutes to an hour. If you're doing something more in the lines of prosthetics, that takes a little bit longer. And you have to go through a whole process of taking a mold of your actor's face, doing a sculpture of what you want the prosthetic to look like, molding that, making a cast of it in foam latex or silicone, whatever material you're using. And then the actual process on set of applying it to the actor, which, depending on how elaborate the piece is, can take anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. I've heard stories on elaborate sets where an actor will be in makeup for 6 hours before they have to be on set to shoot, and their makeup is so intense that they are only able to shoot maybe 2 to 3 hours a day, and then they have to go back to makeup to have it all taken off again, which is another couple of hours.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you look at like, for instance, Day of the Dead, we were talking about these guys. I mean, the level of the amount of zombies they had on screen, and and the work they went through.
And there's a really interesting process to that when they have these hordes of zombies. They have basically warehouses set up full of makeup teams. They'll have, hundreds of makeup artists in there working on zombies. And depending on where the zombies are going to be set in these giant, massive scenes, they have different levels of intensities of makeups. They'll have, the characters that are, the hero makeups, they call them, that are foreground that you see really close and you catch all the detail. Those will be more the prosthetic pieces. And then the characters further away in the shot, they can do things with just grease paint that will read really well on film and will give you the illusion that they look like the ones in the front. And then they'll have the guys farther in the back and they can just throw rubber masks on them and they just blend into the shot. And
so it's basically like a zombie factory, like an assembly line.
More or less, yeah. They have it set up assembly line style.
Right.
They'll have the trailers with, the big makeup kits where the hero makeups are being applied, and then they'll have the warehouse where they'll have massive numbers of makeup artists and extras just lined up, sending them on down the line.
Right on. Well, towards the end of this, I want to get into give the audience out there that are into this kind of work a little bit of a how-to, like from you. But before we get into that, I want to go into back when we were talking about like the modern horror movies and directors and stuff like that. Where do you have an idea on the direction of horror movies compared to where they were? Back when we were talking about Halloween. John Carpenter's Halloween was more of it was very simple. Like the shots, there wasn't a lot of cuts, and it was all pretty straightforward. And then nowadays, you watch a horror film or whatever, and they have 4 different shots of a guy, and all he's doing is walking across the street.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I've heard that called the MTV style of filmmaking, where it's just cut after cut after cut, just to keep the pace up. And cuts are good, but they need to be placed well. I'm more a fan of like the long extended shots.
Right.
Yeah, much more in the line of John Carpenter.
You remember Requiem for a Dream?
Yeah, that was a very bizarre movie.
Yeah, when that first came out, it actually like really. My forte, I mean, I'm a film producer or whatever, but my main thing is like film editing. And when I was getting into it, that movie I saw, and I've never seen anything cut so fast or, like the level of intensity to the editing. Yeah,
and that was definitely deliberate. I like the way Darren Aronofsky uses things like that in his films. That was very deliberate based on, what the characters were going through,
it worked.
Meth addictions and things of that nature. It definitely worked for that film.
Right. But going back to like story and stuff like that, I think you had hit on something about like how they want to humanize everything.
Right.
Like this. Did you see the new RoboCop?
No, I didn't, but I've heard good things from several people.
Well, if you recall, like the original RoboCops, he was like a robot. And in this one, they're trying to humanize him.
Right.
Again, there's like a trend there. Like why? What's this obsession with humanizing and making everything so like, they're trying to cling everything to like reality. Like, oh, we're gonna shoot. This whole movie is like the actor had a camera themselves, and this you're getting to see from their perspective. I mean, it's like, Yeah,
it bothers me to a certain extent because part of going into a film, for me, part of the fun of it has always been the suspension of disbelief. It's like I'm going to take myself somewhere else and just enjoy what's going on in this realm. And films that are based in the real world are fantastic. But sometimes you like to break away into fantasy, and you don't always have to have that element of you can relate to all these characters,
right? And well, like with your story, Graveyard Feeder, you've got I watched a trailer of it. I haven't seen the whole thing, but like you're dealing with like somebody coming back from the dead, like what do they call him, the necromancer?
The story is kind of crazy on that one. Basically, we have the main character, a guy named Burke Sawyer. He's played by a guy you had on your show a couple of weeks ago, Sean Bridgers. Yeah. Fantastic actor. A lot of fun to work with.
Yeah, he's awesome.
We wrote the character. He's a drunk groundskeeper. He works on this old rundown cemetery. He works for this guy named Purvis Pucutty, who's just a shisty businessman. He'll take in a body and get rid of it if you pay him enough money. And at the beginning of the story, this body shows up and has specific instructions to be burned. And the crematorium's out of order. So Burke Sawyer in his drunken stupor says, I'm just going to throw this in an empty grave and I'm going to burn it. And it starts to rain on him, obviously. And he doesn't follow through and comes back the next day and this thing's gone. Just vanished. And strange things start to happen around the cemetery. You know, graves start to sink in. It starts to smell really bad. And he's just like, what is going on? And very much like the ghosts in the Christmas Carol, Burke Sawyer's dead father comes back to him and says, "Hey, look, you've done something to the cemetery. There's something in here that shouldn't be here, and all of us are in danger." So he has to overcome his drunken stupor and his idiocy and step up and become an unwitting hero.
Okay.
And find out what exactly it was that he buried in the cemetery.
Yeah. So that's interesting. You kind of took the it's more of like an anti-hero.
Very much.
You know.
And we take this character who in no logical sense should be the hero. And we make him have to overcome his weaknesses and become the hero. Even if it's for nobody in the real world, it's just for these guys who are already dead. But at least he has enough of a heart to take care of them in the afterlife.
Yeah, I think it's a great story. I'd love to check it out, and I hope it gets made. But speaking of storytelling, I mean, I think what you created there is a good main character because a lot of movies kind of hit or miss, but like you gotta really make the audience care about the dude who's in trouble.
Exactly. If the audience doesn't have an emotional investment, there's not really much point. Otherwise it's just drivel.
And then, we won't give away the ending, but usually it's, here's your hero, and then you got to make them fear for the hero, and then you got to bring them up at the end.
Yeah.
A story is basically an emotional transport,
Yeah, exactly. And if you pay attention, every film that's ever been made pretty much follows the same formula. It tells the same story, but just in a different context, through different perspective. There's always, you introduce your main character, and then there's the exposition. You have the catalyst. Some occurrence happens that sets into motion the chain of events, and then you have your fun and games, the up and downs, and then you have your moment of darkness where something happens that brings your character down to the depths, and they have to grab themselves up by the bootstraps and bring themselves up, and then you have your moment of overcoming the obstacle, and your own moment of coming down off that wild ride.
Right. Now, so we've kind of right here we've laid the foundation of what a basic story would be, and we were talking about like modern stories and films back from what we were influenced by back in the day. So these days they have what they want to try to do is humanize things. They want to show like, oh, this is reality. This was shot on an iPhone or something like that. Back then, back in the day, like in the 70s and 80s and stuff with like the campy horror movies and stuff like that, what was reality for those movies was how real they made the effects and the emotions that were shown from the people, not necessarily how it was shot or how intense the cuts were.
Right. It's a different audience nowadays than it was back then, and I think a lot of the content that's being produced is more aimed to that particular audience. But there's definitely a different stylistic approach nowadays, and it kind of bleeds over into the industry too, because the kind of content that people are looking for and the kind of content that's being created, just about anybody can produce with the kind of technology that's available nowadays, and it's making it a little bit more difficult for those of us who are classically trained to do things the old-fashioned way. And the whole market for entertainment is changing with streaming media and whatnot. So the whole entertainment industry is in a little bit of upheaval right now, and hopefully we'll be able to weather the storm and come out shining on the other side.
Yeah. Well, and just going back to like you were taught at the Tom Savini School, if you go back and you watch Day of the Dead, if you analyze the effects that were done, and then you look at real life, and try to imagine that effect happening in real life, what you see on screen is like as real as it's probably going to get. Yeah,
exactly. And it's funny because in a lot of the research that we had to do in school, we had to look at a lot of very graphic, real-life pictures because, like you said, the object in doing these things is to make them look as real as possible. And it's kind of funny because sometimes what you see on the screen is much more grotesque than what you see in real life. I mean, the real-life pictures are, they're real, and it makes your stomach turn to look at them. But, what you see on screen is very exaggerated.
Yeah. Well, and in that movie, like, the acting was over the top. Like, each actor was pretty intense.
Very much.
With their deliveries and stuff. But, the stylistic approach that they took on that movie was awesome. And, I always strive to see that creative, like, people are trying. They want to try to do it. They didn't just have a bunch of money. That's what strikes my creativity and interest when I watch a movie.
Yeah, and that's what's really nice about watching lower budget films like the Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead and some other, like George Romero is just an auteur in that sense. A lot of his stuff was done on very, very tight budgets, and the stuff that Tom Savini and his guys were able to pull off in those films was just amazing with the kind of budgets that they had.
Did Tom Savini make an impression on you as far as like how to collaborate with people or being like a team player? I mean, what were some of the things that you took from him that you learned for your craft?
You definitely have to be a people person. One of the things that I learned from Tom is about that you need to be a salesman for yourself in this industry. You have to be able to convince everybody around you that you're the best there is at what you're doing. But at the same time, you definitely have to be able to stride a fine line and not come across as a jerk, because you can come across a jerk very easily when you're trying to sell yourself hard on the people around you. You can come off very cocky, but that's the nature of a lot of people in this industry. You just have to be able to overlook that and work well with others.
Right. And as far as his philosophy for creating effects and stuff like that, did he make an impression on you as far as how to approach, actually doing it and your creativity in it?
Yeah. A lot of it, here again, it comes into collaborating with people, because you have to be able to, as a special effects artist, you have to be able to collaborate with the art department and the camera department, and you have to communicate well with your director. You have to be able to sit down before you ever start fabricating anything for any particular effect. You need to be able to sit down with your director, the director of photography, and the art department, and look at the storyboards of the shots and say, okay, what are we looking at here? What do we want to see? So that you know the appropriate way to produce the effect that they want to see. You need to know how it's going to be shot, so that some instances you have to hide wires, you have to hide tubes, and it's definitely a synergy.
Right. Just thinking back to what I had seen on one of the behind the scenes, and I think you mentioned it, but it's like, what would it look like in real life? And you guys had to look at real pictures and stuff like that. It's kind of crazy, But that's where authenticity comes in,
It really is, and that's what directors and what audiences want to see. They want to see that level of realism. If they want something cartoony, they'll let that be known. But that's more in the fantasy end of things. When you see cartoony, that doesn't really apply to horror.
Right.
Yeah, they want to see things that are as believable as possible, because at the end of the day, you're creating an illusion. You have to convince your audience that they're seeing what they're seeing.
Okay. Now, if I was in your shoes and I was starting out and I wanted to work with, like, say, a local film group, film company, or, a local production where somebody's putting together something, horror movie, could you give us an idea of what we would need for our toolbox as far as, like, getting, to be prepared to do that? The basics.
Well, pretty much you just toy around with what you have. When Halloween comes around, stock up on grease paint, practice on your friends. You can start working on sculpting. Look at anatomy books. Look at as many photos as you can. Do as much visual research as possible, and do as much work as possible, and take pictures of everything you do, because it all matters. Everybody's going to look at that, and when it comes down to it, when you're showing your work to somebody, you want to keep your portfolio to about 5 to 10 pictures. Keep it short and sweet, and make it your best work. But practice as much as possible. Practice makeup on your friends. Read books. Watch YouTube videos. There's a lot of good resources out there if you know where to look.
Did you have to? Was there like an application process to get into the school, or?
Yeah. I actually I went up and I had to take a placement exam, fill out a full application. Just pretty much like going to any other college, because it was a program in a business school. So it's kind of like getting into SEC, but significantly more expensive.
Yeah.
But it was fairly simple application process.
Did they ask you for any of your previous work, or not really?
No, not really. They just took you into the program. A lot of the kids that were there didn't have any previous experience. They were just excited about trying to get into the film industry and making monsters. They'd grown up on monster movies and decided, hey, this is what I want to do for a career. Okay. But they didn't really have any background in it. There were a couple of people there who did, but they're all working now, so that's good.
Well, from what I can tell, what you're saying, like if I was a mechanic or a handyman, you might say, well, you're going to need a screwdriver or a wrench, da-da-da-da. But from what I'm taking from you is like it's kind of random, because you're trying to replicate real life.
Yeah, it really is.
So it's
and a lot of it is experimentation, just seeing what you can do with things around the house, things from the kitchen, things from the makeup cabinet. You can, like I said, there's a lot of good tutorial videos on YouTube of people doing amazing stuff with very limited supplies. Just with face paint and a little bit of Knox gelatin, can do wonders.
Well, it's crazy too. Like, so they use like real body parts for Day of the Dead,
right?
Or intestines, from pigs.
Yeah, and they just bought those from a local slaughterhouse, and
apparently they had like a real slice of a human brain or something in the movie.
Yeah, they bought a lot of stuff from medical supply companies, and
it's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, but anything for believability. If it's going to be more believable to have the real thing there as opposed to a rubber prop, then if the director wants to do it and he's got the wherewithal and the resources, more power to him. It makes for a nice visual ride. Yeah.
Well, that's really awesome, man. I think this has been a great talk about like the craft, the industry. It's a shame that it didn't work out with Tom McFarlane. Me and my brothers were big fans of those figurines,
Yeah.
and now you're saying they're doing them all digital.
Yeah, and it's kind of unfortunate. It seems like digital is more or less becoming the way of the future. A lot of what I do has been replaced in the last 10 years with digital effects, and the better directors out there that are working on big budgets are finding a nice medium ground between doing practical effects and digital effects and getting the best of both worlds.
Right.
For a while there, it seemed like my craft was going to be a thing of the past, but it seems like it's starting to make a little bit of a resurgence. So,
did you get into Robert Rodriguez's films?
Oh yeah, Rodriguez is fantastic.
He inspired me to be a filmmaker.
Nice.
His get to itness, and he was always informative. Like, hey, if you want to be a filmmaker, this is how I did it. It's like he felt like a very open artist.
Yeah. And from what I hear, Rodriguez is a madman. Savini worked with him a lot. He was actually working on Grindhouse. He had a small role in Grindhouse, the Tarantino Rodriguez film came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
He had a small role in that, and he was shooting that while I was in school, so he was back and forth.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I don't know what I would say to Robert Rodriguez if I was to meet him. I would pretty much be starstruck, I guess, but the dude's influenced me a lot, as far as like editing and, just working with what you have.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what
he's
all
a
about.
big inspiration. He's a fantastic artist.
But he was able to meld the digital and the authentic, effects.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my favorites is Sin City. And Sin City is it's chock full of digital effects, but the characters, every single one of those characters is under makeup, even though it's shot in black and white. There's so much fantastic detail in every one of those characters, even things that you wouldn't think of as being prosthetic. Like Benicio del Toro's character was wearing a prosthetic nose.
Okay.
And nobody would think that right off. It's very subtle. But then you have the more exaggerated makeups, like what the character Marv was wearing.
Yeah, the guy got electrocuted.
Yeah, Mickey Rourke was under a lot of prosthetics for that movie, but it was really great because it really brought that character to life. You see, if you read the comic books, Marv is very simple line drawing type character. Frank Miller's illustration style is very rough, but it was one of the beautiful things about that movie that Robert Rodriguez was actually able to capture the comic book. You could pretty much close your eyes, open the graphic novel, point to a picture, and then freeze frame the movie and find the corresponding frame, and you're just like, wow, this is almost a shot for shot reproduction. It's beautiful. And the way those actors played those characters, they owned it. It was fantastic.
Were you a fan of the book before the film came out?
Yeah, it had been a long time since I read them. It's probably been, God, at this point, I'd say it's probably been 15 years since I've read the graphic novels. But I remember reading them when I was in high school, and it was very influential on me. I love Frank Miller's work. I read 300 and all of his Batman work that he did in the 80s and 90s. Frank Miller's fantastic.
Oh,
his whole run on Daredevil was amazing.
He's coming out with a new Sin City.
Yeah, I saw the trailers for it. I'm excited.
What do you think, man?
It looks good. It looks very good. I'm excited to see the character of Dwight, who in the original, the first Sin City, the guy who went into Old Town, the town full of hookers. And this is his story previous to that. In the first Sin City, they kept on saying, oh, here comes Dwight with his new face. He's back in town. And this is Dwight with his old face. So they have a completely different actor in the role this time.
Okay. Well, I mean, and that brings up, I guess, a good final point to make is that, so your effects can be as real as they can be, and and that's well and good, but you got to have a good story, to go along with it.
Absolutely. I mean, you can have the most fantastic effects on the face of the planet, and if your story is not there, then it kind of is pointless. You have to have that story because, like I said earlier, your audience has to have that emotional investment for your movie to even have a point.
I mean, because gore heads or we appreciate horror movies and stuff like that, and we'll sit down and we'll watch a trauma movie.
Yeah.
And be a fan of it because eye candy, but like, Trauma's not really known for their stories.
Yeah, you don't watch the trauma movies for their stories.
They're not breaking.
No, not at all.
Ground.
Those guys are guerrilla filmmakers. I've met a few guys that work for Trauma, and it's insane. They work on like 2-3 hours sleep. They're on set all the time, and they're just madmen, shooting everything they can, and they don't care about the story, they don't care about budget, they just care about having a good time, and putting it on film for other people to enjoy.
And that's awesome.
Yeah, because they have a fantastic market for it. Everybody, who knows, much about the horror end of the genre knows Trauma, and everybody's got sort of a dark, soft spot in their heart for Trauma, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and they've even created a whole film festival around it.
Yeah,
but I mean, would you agree with me that it's story first?
Absolutely.
Effects second? Absolutely,
because, as a filmmaker, I do special effects, but I'm a writer also. I consider myself, a learning filmmaker. Everything I'm doing is a learning experience. But yes, we're the storytellers of the modern age, so that is definitely the priority in creating a film, is creating a solid story.
I think story is underrated. I don't think people really fully grasp the power of story.
No, I don't think they do. I don't think they do, especially in this age of convenience where everything has to be prepackaged and ready to consume. It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the audience that things are being produced for nowadays with the MTV style of filmmaking, with the cut. It's all prepackaged. People, and that gets into the relatability issue, with the characters becoming more human. They're trying to make them more accessible for people, characters that might not necessarily supposed to be accessible to people.
Well, it's like we keep talking about Day of the Dead, but like that movie, the effects in it are awesome, but I think equal to that was the storyline.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the beauty of George Romero's movies. If you watch the originals, you can see that the common theme through all of them, aside from the zombies, of course, is that the real horror isn't what's outside trying to get in. It's what's inside the walls. The real horror is the human element, not the zombies. And that's one thing that I think is fantastic about The Walking Dead. Bring that up since we're talking about zombies. A lot of people complain sometimes that they feel like it's too slow, there's not enough zombies. And I'm like, well, really, the show is about the characters. And the real horror comes from the characters. Like, the scariest thing was the character of the governor, for people who are familiar with the show. That was one of the scariest things for me about the entire story that's been told so far. And the little girl that goes missing. They're things, they're evil people, and they're things that are happening to children. Things that even outside the zombie things, they could be happening in the real world. It's just in a different context. So those things to me are scary. And in the George Romero movies, the crazy people that are flipping out inside the walls and, threatening to hurt the other people that are, have survived and are inside with them, those are the real threats.
When you talk about scare, I don't know. I don't like being scared, really. I'm not a big fan of like, I want to go through the haunted house.
Oh, everybody loves being scared.
Do you like to go to like the haunted house at the amusement parks?
Oh yeah, that's a blast. Me and Rich usually every year we try to go down to Carowinds in the fall because they turn it into Scarowinds and they have the little haunted house themes all over the park. Yeah, and it's a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you're a big fan of Halloween then?
Yeah, Halloween is like Christmas for me.
I love Halloween myself because of the creativity that you see across the board from everybody.
Yeah, it's
like,
great.
From like women to children or anybody, they're getting into it.
Yeah, it's the one time of the year that you get to dress up like an idiot and not get looked at funny. Yeah,
and they try to. You kind of get pigeonholed at Christmas or Easter or these things like, okay, red and green is for Christmas. You need to put your lights up and Santa and this and that. But like with Halloween, it's like, you know, you got pumpkins and stuff like that. That's nice, but pretty much you can do whatever, you know, you want.
Yeah.
As long as you're, you know, having fun with it. And I love seeing people's setups going down the road.
Oh yeah, it's great. You don't see so much of it around here.
That's true.
That was one thing that was really nice about when I was living in Pennsylvania, going to Tom Savini's school, is the area up there really embraces Halloween. And people decorate for Halloween like people decorate for Christmas around here. I mean, you'll drive up the street and every house will have Halloween setups, and you know people still go trick or treating in neighborhoods. It's really cool.
I mean, when I was a kid, the coolest thing about the neighborhood where I was living at, it was towards the coast, and it was sort of like in a development area. And for the listeners, we're right now in the hills, Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. It's the Bible Belt. And anyways, one of the coolest things about Halloween was seeing the neighborhood, the houses that took it too far. Because my mom always tried to like, oh, you can't watch rated R movies, this and that. But then I was like, oh, that guy's got a knife in his chest. That's awesome. And we'd watch it every time we go by to go to school or whatever.
Nice.
So, you know. So story first, be creative, and anything else we should tell them, man?
If you're trying to make films out there, you know, just keep on keeping on. That's all we can tell you. Just keep on trying to do what you do, work on your stories, and make some great visuals to go along with them.
Awesome.
It's a learning process.
Yeah, man. And so you do the prosthetics and sculptural work in town, but there's also another guy, Eric Hokuson, and
Right.
he actually does like armor for Star Wars and stuff like that.
Yeah. I've met Eric and been to his shop. He's got a really great setup, and he does some really great work. Seen some of his Stormtrooper armor that he's produced, and he showed me some armor that he did from the anime Appleseed.
Nice.
That I think he and his wife wore down to Dragon Con a few years ago. It was really, really impressive.
Awesome.
But yeah, Eric does great work. I guess he told me a while back that he was doing some work for the 501st Legion, which is, for those of you who don't know, I think is a Star Wars battalion that travels around all the big conventions. They go to Dragon Con in Atlanta. They go to San Diego for the Comic Con out there every year, and some of the other big ones. I think Wonderfest maybe, but they're one of the officially recognized fan groups, and 501st Legion is it's one of the battalions of stormtroopers from the original trilogy, and they call themselves this group calls themselves the 501st Legion. They dress up as stormtroopers, and
nice.
And I guess they have a guy dress up as Vader that goes around with them too.
So what about him? Did they commission him or?
Yeah, I think they just started seeing some of his work and thought he did great work, and started having him create some pieces for him. I don't know if they started out as like private pieces, like people involved with the 501st Legion discovered Eric and said, oh, I want him to make some stuff for me, and it just kind of word spread. I'm not sure exactly how that went for him, but
well, I want to talk to him. I'm going to get him here on Romine Radio.
Oh, great.
Talk to him about his craft. But after that, I'd love to have you two, and we'll do like a 3-man conversation about the industry and do a talk about that, because I know I'm not as much into comics or like the Dragon Con and all that. Like, I mean, I've focused on my craft as a filmmaker, but I don't consider myself like a nerd.
Yeah.
As far as like being a fanatic and all that, but I appreciate it and I respect it. So I think if we were to get you guys together, it would be like gas and fire.
I'll look forward to that. It'd be a lot of fun.
You're gonna come back, man? What do you think?
Most definitely. It's been a blast today.
Awesome, dude. Well, thanks for talking to me. And for those of you guys out there, stay creative. And it's been great talking to you, Aaron.
Great.
You guys can.
It's been great to be here.
Is your work on the internet or anything up yet? Or?
Yeah, if you go on Facebook and do a search for The Graveyard Feeder, there should be links to the full short. Full short's available online.
Awesome.
It's a little over 10 minutes.
I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, and there's also, if you go to backwoodsmovies.com, there's links to 3 promotional trailers that I did with Rich Robinson for 3 separate properties. They're a lot of fun. I think people would like to check them out.
And so Rich was the guy that went to School of the Arts,
Right.
and then you connected with him. How'd you guys connect?
We actually connected over the promotional trailers that I just mentioned. I had just gotten out of school, and I guess I'd been out of school maybe 6 months. And I got a call from the job placement department at the school I graduated from. Said, hey, I know you're in North Carolina. We just got contacted by a production in North Carolina that's looking for somebody who does what we do. So if you want to get in contact with them, this might be something that's a worthwhile venture for you.
Awesome.
So I contacted him back, and actually the person I got in contact with was a guy named Tim Allison, and he was the art director working with Rich at the time on the projects, and he brought me on board, put me in contact with Rich, and things just, it was like you said, gasoline and fire. Things just took off with me and Rich from there. He's been impressed with my work and kept me on board for every production we've done, and we've collaborated a lot.
Backwoodsfilm.com.
Yep.
Is that with an S?
Yes.
Films.
Actually, it's Backwoods Movies. Backwoodsmovies.com.
Okay, and then I'm gonna go check out the Graveyard Feeder. I didn't get to see the whole thing.
Cool. I think you'll enjoy it.
That's the
I
one
hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, that's the one you're shopping around to try to get the feature going.
Right.
So you guys have written the script.
Yeah. We wrote the script, and basically the short came about as we were trying to raise money for the feature. We found an investor who was willing to take a gamble on us, but he didn't have a lot of money to put toward it. So he invested what he could and said, use this however you can to try to make more money. So we decided, well, our best bet here is to use these funds to create this short and try to use the short as sort of a proof of concept to go along with our script.
What'd you guys shoot that on?
We used the Red.
You used the Red camera.
Yeah.
Awesome, dude.
Yeah, it was nice.
Did you guys work with a cameraman or who?
Yeah, we have a director of photography that works with us. He's one of our partners now. His name's Jeff Stepp. He's from Winston. He does really fantastic work.
All right, cool, man. The trailer looked professional as hell, man. It was awesome.
Great, thank you.
And you guys got Sean Breeders in there.
Yep.
That he's in his element, man.
Yeah, he definitely is. We wrote that part with Sean in the back of our minds, and I was so happy when I was actually able to make contact with Sean, and he liked the project and wanted to come on board and play this character because I don't know if a lot of your listeners are really familiar with Sean's body of work, but he's really strong at deadpan comedy, which is what the character is through and through. And we just visualized him in this role, and I could just see him delivering the lines as we wrote it. And the first time we met up and sat down and had a table read, I was just like goosebumps all over my body. I was like, this is what I've heard in my head for the past 2 years we've been writing this script. So and it was so fantastic. I actually see him on set. When I walked on set the first day he was there in character, I was just like, oh my God, there's Burke Sawyer in the flesh. This is insane,
man. Making a movie is exciting as hell. Isn't it?
Really is.
When you get in there and it starts happening,
it's tough work. It really is. When you're on set, it's crazy. It's sweat and blood and egos, and on a good production, you don't really have to deal with the egos too much, and which we've been lucky. We haven't had to deal with that much.
All right.
We definitely didn't have to deal with it with Sean. He's one of the most laid back guys I've ever dealt with on a set. So, and he's extremely professional.
Dude, he's worked on Justified. Right now he's on another movie, TV show called Rectified. You got those five going, and then what else was he in? Deadwood. If for the listeners who haven't seen it, check it out. It's a Western. No, not everybody's into Westerns, but this is different. It's a different brand of Western. And it's gritty, man. It's cool, dude.
Yeah, and Sean's character is fantastic. He's one of the highlights of that show for me. Even before I met Sean, I loved watching Johnny, his character in Deadwood.
Yeah.
So funny.
Well, I think Sean's look isn't the the alpha male hero. That
Yeah,
everybody
he's
would think
definitely
of.
the everyman.
Yeah, he's an everyman. And so when you see him act, it's real, man.
Yeah, it really is.
And he has this ability just to turn it on, He's a professional, for sure. So, awesome, man. Well, check out Graveyard Feeder. And you guys got to go to Backwoods Movies. Check out his promos there. And it's been great having you, Aaron.
Thanks. It's been great to be here.
Hopefully we'll see you in a couple weeks with you and Eric Hokuson. We'll get you guys together.
Yeah. I'd love to come back.
All right, man. Well, take it easy. And this has been Romine Radio. And we'll see you next week.